All right. We are live. We are doing this. Hey, everybody. I am Elizabeth Benton. Thanks so much for joining me today. We have been planning to do a live show for a really long time, and God bless all the people who do live shows. It is more complex. Despite having had a podcast for over 10 years now, I'm pretty low tech. I'm pretty low tech. So doing a live show is a big adjustment, but it's something that I've been super passionate about. So let me first say, if you are somebody who has ever felt confused or frustrated or overwhelmed by what feels like conflicting information around nutrition, where some people are like, oh, you absolutely need to eat carbs or else you're going to destroy your thyroid. And other people are like, you do not need carbohydrates and it is going to lead you down a path to chronic disease. And it's not just carbohydrates, right? There's extreme opinions on both sides with fat, with protein. And then even if we were to break it down further than that, with dairy, with gluten, with just about everything, right? So if you are somebody who has felt frustrated by that, felt overwhelmed by that, really felt like you don't know where to turn and who to trust, we're going to talk about that tonight. I'm very much looking forward to it. And let me tell you why we're doing this. Like, why isn't this a podcast? You know, if it was a podcast, I could record it at 7:00 in the morning and I don't have to worry about if I'm looking at the camera or if I look shifty because I'm looking someplace else. It's a lot more simple to do a podcast. But what a podcast doesn't allow us to do, that I am very passionate about doing right now and moving forward, is the ability for us to interact. So if you've ever worked with me in any capacity, I always say to people, I want to hear from you. Oh, you can't see my face? You should be able to see my face. Hey, can somebody else let me know? That's good feedback. If my husband is watching, can you tell me if you can see my face? Because you should be able to see my face. Let me know. Okay. So assuming you can see my face, I hope you can. That is certainly the intent. We've got 11 people here, so hopefully somebody will let me know if you can't. But what I really want is the connection, the interaction, the back and forth. All of that is so incredibly important to me. So if you've ever worked with me before, you have heard me talk about how this is your show. You can only see half of my face. That's weird. Huh. I don't know why, ice cream emergency. I can see all of my face. I wonder what device you're on. I wonder if, oh, well, whatever. At least you can see part of it. The title page is covering your face. That's so weird. I don't see that. Huh. Okay, well, we can fix that. Add to stage. Okay, so I can see all of me, but I see me to the left of my graphic, but you do not. So that is interesting. So, solo layout. Is that better or worse? Let me know if that is better or worse. We will figure this out. I appreciate all of you guys being so generous as to help. Otherwise, that's not going to work. Okay, let's try speaker view. Okay, at least this way now the graphic is gone. I didn't want the graphic to be gone, but it's worse, the same. Okay, we'll do it this way for now, and we will figure that out later. I appreciate you guys helping me troubleshoot. We didn't have that problem before. All right, so now the overlay is gone, but that is okay. So back to why the live show. I really want, you can see my microphone. Yeah, that's okay. You're supposed to see my microphone. I can't make that disappear. Sorry, Beverly. Okay, the reason that I want to do this live show is because I want to be able to interact. I mean, I don't love the tech issues, but it's bound to happen. I want to know your questions. When I record a podcast, if you have a question, you then have to find my email address and remember the question when you're at your computer and you have the time to craft me an email. And this allows us to really have a dialogue. And that is what I want, because let's be real, there are only a couple of things that are more important than how we care for our bodies. I know in my life, there's not much that is more important than that other than God, right? There's so much on the line here. And my sense is that a lot of people are on the sidelines of their health because they're confused, because there's all of this misinformation. And again, it's not just the misinformation around big picture things like carbs or no carbs, high carb or low carb, keto or carnivore, or, counting macros. It's all the little niche stuff. There's literally not anything that we could evaluate that doesn't have some controversy around it. And I've shared on the couple of times that I've done test runs, which is so weird because when I've done test runs before, nobody said they couldn't see my face. That's a conversation for another day. I will not be distracted by that. What I've shared is that when we have all this access to information, it's almost like a sword that cuts both ways. It's fantastic to have all the information, but if it ends up keeping you on the sidelines, it's no good at all. And we don't want that, right? We want clarity. And clarity can be found, but having to sift through a sea of millions of opinions is something that most of us don't have the time to do, and many of us don't have the expertise to do. How do you know who to trust, right? How can you possibly know if this person is right versus this person? And I have good news. There is a way that you can know. And one of my biggest pet peeves in the information space, whether that is books, ebooks, podcasts, influencers, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people position anything, but especially nutrition, as it's this way for everybody or it's that way for everybody. There's really nothing that is like that, right? I mean, maybe there's a couple things that we could agree, like, hey, BPA, you want to avoid it. It's not good. But when we talk about ways of eating, there just is no one right way that is appropriate for everybody, which brings us back to, why am I doing this? I want to build the relationship with you where you can ask those tough, tricky, and personalized questions. And I want to help you cut through the noise and break it down a little bit. So to kind of go back to the what is the truth, what is the big picture, what is the approach that is the most healthy, even if you momentarily hate me for it and feel initially more confused, we'll clear that up. It's different for everybody. And also, this is a big piece that gets missed that very few people are talking about. It's different for each person over time. So what is right for my body right now is not the same thing as what was right for my body 8 years ago. And you know what? It's probably not what's going to be right for my body 6 months from now. So we have to know how to sift through that data. And the problem is, most of us are too busy paying attention to other people that we've lost the ability, or maybe we've never developed the ability to pay attention to ourselves. Because the beautiful and brilliant thing about the human body is that it has a ton of feedback mechanisms, subjective things we can feel and observe, but also there's objective data we can tap into. And we're going to discuss both of those things tonight. And so the way that I want to begin to break this down with you is by sharing a couple of changes that I have made recently, what prompted me to make them, if I think you should make them, and then the objective data that told me if I should keep doing it or not. The objective data that informed what I'm doing moving forward. Nancy says, my body is my best doctor. I love that. I mean, I think that it is the smoke detector. It is the carbon monoxide detector. It is the thing always giving us feedback. The problem is, most of us are so busy multitasking or so distrusting of our bodies or so confused or overwhelmed, and or could be all of the above, head buried in everybody else's opinion. You want to read every new book. You want to listen to every health podcast. You follow 27 health influencers online. No wonder we feel like we don't know up from down. So let's streamline. And I want to share with you, I talked about this on episode 1285 of the podcast. So if you want to kind of know the details of the changes that I made, I'm going to kind of jump to what I experienced as a result of it and how I know where to go from here. But episode 1285 of the Primal Potential podcast, I talked about how I did a 30-day autoimmune anti-inflammatory diet protocol. There weren't any changes that had to do with movement or sleep or stress. All of those things are super important. This was a diet thing, okay? And when I say diet, I don't mean like weight loss hack. I mean what I ate and didn't eat. It's designed for inflammation and autoimmune conditions. I don't have an autoimmune condition, okay? But that doesn't mean there isn't one brewing. I don't know whether there is or whether there isn't. And we all have inflammation. Most of us don't know what it feels like to live without inflammation. We're almost all operating with excessive inflammation. And for some of us, we feel that in our joints. For some of us, we feel that in different gut symptoms. For other people, it's cognitive. And maybe it feels like brain fog for you, or it feels like trouble focusing, or it feels like anxiety or depression. All of those things are linked to inflammation, as is stubborn weight loss and so much more. Now, as I shared in 1285, I didn't do this protocol because I was bored, and I didn't do it because there was a specific issue I was trying to target, although I have shared that my only experience in life with anxiety was postpartum anxiety about a year after my twins were discharged from the NICU, and it wrecked me. But I was in a dramatically better place when I started this protocol. And it's important to note that we can eat clean and not think there is anything wrong and be wrong, because we think that the brain fog is just because we're stressed, or we think that the trouble sleeping is just because we're getting older. And so what I think often happens is we accept feeling average, fair as normal, and we don't ever pursue optimal because we don't think something's wrong, right? I mean, if something is glaringly 5-alarm fire wrong, most of us are going to respond to it. But what happens when it's just this low-grade anxiety you always have, or this chronic depression you can't seem to shake, or the fact that you think you have no ability to focus? And part of the problem is people have just slapped labels and diagnoses on things without ever tying it to something as foundational as inflammation. And so even though I wouldn't have said to you, I have an autoimmune issue or I have an inflammatory issue, I was very curious about what would happen if I made these changes for 30 days. And I very much intended to do 30 days and stop. And part of the reason I did it is because I have a family member who I was really hoping would take on some of these changes, but I knew her perception was, well, what the heck am I going to eat? Because it's pretty restrictive. And so I was like, well, if I do it for 30 days, then if she decides to do it at some time, I've made it easier by saying, hey, here you go, you do this. So anyway, before I tell you about the changes and then the results of the changes, I want to say this loud and clear, okay? I don't know if all of you who are on here live with me or all of you who catch this later will be in this boat, but I will say this. 10 years ago, I would not have been ready to do this. Okay, an autoimmune inflammatory protocol, because 10 years ago, or 11 or 12, probably more like, it would have been just another extreme diet, another all or nothing, another thing started and finished with a big binge. And so I don't want to suggest that I am recommending dramatic dietary shifts to anybody who does not yet have consistency with the basics, okay? And the basics are debatable, but I would say if you are consistently overeating or binge eating, or you still have a lot of processed foods in your diet, I would focus on that stuff first. Or if you have a very disordered eating pattern in your thoughts with all or nothing, I'll start tomorrow, this one thing won't hurt, that kind of stuff, that's got to get fixed first. Okay. So I want to be clear that this is not something I would have embarked on unless it was out of medical necessity, because I wasn't mentally ready for it. And again, if you're on here live and you have questions, drop them in the chat, because that's why I'm doing this way. I want your questions. I'm going to show you some of my lab results that reinforced the next steps I had to take, but also I want to talk about some of the subjective markers. So the changes that I made for this protocol, which typically is recommended for 30 to 90 days, and I'm like, I'm going to do it for 30 days and then I'm going to start reintroducing some things. The 30 days is now done. But to summarize, and all the details are in episode 1285 of the podcast: no eggs, no dairy, no gluten, no sugar, no alcohol, no potatoes, no tomatoes, no rice, no corn, no pork. So you're probably like, what is left? Most vegetables, most fruits, but only fresh fruits, fish, chicken, no shellfish, avocado, raw nuts. That's what I was eating. So mostly chicken and fish, a little bit of beef, avocado, tiny bit of fruit, and some sweet potatoes, but no white potatoes. And Nancy says, did you reintroduce certain foods at different intervals? I'm going to talk about that. Yeah, not for the first 30 days. The earliest reentry would be at 30 days. And I want to share with you how I decided if it was time to reintroduce or if it was not time to reintroduce. Okay. Okay. So I was eating chicken, fish, avocado. Here's what I experienced over 30 days. You know what was really interesting? Zero weight loss. I still have about 18 postpartum pounds I want to lose. And I was super surprised that my weight didn't change at all. But I will say this: my measurements went down. Okay. So can't that be frustrating sometimes when the scale stays the same? But I was taking measurements, my hips, my waist, my bust, my thighs, my arms, all of those went down. And yes, Nancy, I did also limit spices and seasonings. Pamela says, what the heck did you eat for breakfast? That was the hardest part for me, Pamela, because for a long time, my breakfast has been Greek yogurt and protein powder. And that was the hardest shift to make. Initially, I tried doing like a chia pudding. I share that recipe in my fat loss ebook. It's mango, blueberry, lime juice, coconut milk, and coconut milk in the can, not like boxed coconut milk that's really water and God knows what else. And something else. But that recipe is in my fat loss ebook. The problem is I didn't love it. Coffee is a no, but I know my husband's going to dime me out in the chat because that's the one change I didn't make. I still had my morning coffee. But that is not allowed. But here's the deal, you guys. I am human and I have 3 toddlers, and I do not think it would be safe for my children or my husband if I didn't have coffee. So just keeping it real. It was funny. My mom and her husband started doing this protocol a couple of weeks ago, and we were having dinner together and they're complaining about missing the coffee. And my husband looks at me and he's like, wait, they're doing what you said you were doing, but what were you doing? Because you were having coffee. And I was like, you just threw me right under the bus. But that is his style. If you know my husband, nothing is safe. Nothing is safe. There is no such thing as like a family secret. He threw me right under the bus. And I was like, listen, they don't have young children. Okay. They don't have young children. So I did get a pass on coffee, but I was already just drinking black coffee. I do think, especially if you have an autoimmune condition, like I was kind of doing it more out of curiosity, but if you're doing it for like therapeutic effect, and obviously none of this is medical advice, disclaim, I'm not a doctor, yada, yada. Consult your physician. I do recommend that. I am human. I drank my morning coffee, but I didn't drink coffee after my morning coffee, like no midday coffee or anything like that. Okay. Breakfast was the hardest part. So to go back to that, I started doing a chia pudding, but I don't really love sweet in the morning that much. So what I ended up shifting to was dinner leftovers. And I would just do dinner leftovers for breakfast. That doesn't bother me. I am not somebody who needs breakfast food for breakfast. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. So I found that the easiest thing was dinner leftovers. That's the way I rolled. One of my favorite things lately has been avocado, red onion, cilantro, sort of like a cheap not cheap, but a fast guac, lime juice, red onion, cilantro, avocado, mix it up with some ground turkey or ground chicken. Excellent. And I will say on St. Patrick's Day, we made a lamb stew. My mom's husband made it. It was really good. And I don't even really like lamb, but it was super, super good. He did say it was work intensive. So still some like fun celebratory food options for things like the holidays when I wasn't doing corned beef and cabbage this year. Okay. The hardest part was definitely breakfast, but let's talk about what I experienced. So I told you my weight didn't move, but my measurements all went down and I noticed changes in my body. Like you guys probably don't notice these kinds of things, but I noticed less inflammation in my jawline. That's not necessarily like a fatty area for me, but I definitely noticed less inflammation there that looks like just more definition. I noticed less inflammation in my hands, in my midsection. So that was really cool. But, I was kind of surprised the scale didn't go down, but that's just one of those things where we get to practice emotional sobriety, because the fact is my measurements were changing. I was fitting into smaller clothes. I can see a difference. I can feel a difference. One of the things that I was most excited about, and I hope nobody else struggles with anxiety because it was so bad and so hard. And I feel like I was in a way better place with my anxiety when I started the protocol, but it got way better still in terms of anxiety reduction. So grateful for that. Honestly, that alone is worth me continuing to do that. That is one of those subjective bits of feedback that our body gives us when we eat a certain way and we feel more calm or more focused or more anxious or more overwhelmed. We need to pay attention to that stuff. Speaking of focus, my ability to focus came back. I have been talking about how I feel like my brain didn't begin to come back online until my twins turned 2. So I had 4 babies in less than 2.5 years, my last 2 being identical twin girls who had, they gave me a run for my money in my pregnancy. They were very preterm, spent a long time in the NICU, but I didn't feel like my brain started to come back online until they were 2. They're 2.5 now. But this protocol, I absolutely felt like, oh, there's my mental acuity. There's my ability to focus. I thought it was gone forever. And that I just want to reiterate how I think sometimes we accept feeling crappy as normal parts of aging. And I want to be here to shout from the rooftops. That is not true. That is not true. I also noticed my skin looked clearer. I've never had acne issue. Well, that's not true. In my adult life, I've not had acne issues, but my skin was just brighter. Now it's not really this dark. I got a spray tan today because we're going on a trip next week. So this is spray tan, Elizabeth. My drive, my motivation, everything just felt better. And the other thing that I'll mention, and this is sort of like mild but significant to me, I had been having not belly pain, but this just recurrent discomfort. I wouldn't call it gas or bloating. I don't really know how to describe it. But it had been there for really, really mild. Like I'd call it a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10 at worst, and often a 0, but it almost entirely went away. So that was very, very significant. And again, if you guys have questions, hit me with it, because I want it, whatever you're thinking, I'm happy to share about it. Now, I really missed my Greek yogurt and my whey protein powder because I think that they make it easier to hit my protein goals. So they make it more convenient for me to eat healthy. They're quick and easy. I can do it in a matter of seconds. I missed that. But at the end of the 30 days, I felt so good. I wanted to keep going. And I think sometimes we focus more on what we want to eat than on how we want to feel. And I know that was a trap that I was in for a really long time, just making it so big, blowing it up to larger than life energy and focus, what I wanted to eat, what I wanted to indulge in, what I felt I was missing out on. And I really didn't give appropriate attention to how I wanted to feel. And over time, I've shifted that. And so, as much as I missed my Greek yogurt, I was like, I actually think that this is worth continuing because I feel so good. And yes, Nancy, absolutely regular bowel movements. If anything, like more regular, not like more frequent, but more regular, which is a great indicator of detoxification. I think a lot of people think of bowel movements as like stomach comfort or bloating, positive or negative, but if you're not moving your bowels regularly, you are not detoxifying fully. And so if you don't think that that impacts your disease risk, you're wrong, because it does. So regularity is about way more than if you feel constipated or if you feel bloated. It is one of your primary detoxification pathways. Okay. What I want to do now is I want to show you a couple of objective, those are all subjective measures. I mean, except for inches, those are all subjective measures. So what I want to do, I think you're going to lose my face for a second, but what I want to show you, Nancy says MCT oil. That should be okay. So long as it's a clean one that doesn't have additives or anything like that. The reason being that's a coconut derivative and coconut is fine. Okay. So I want to show you this. Last June, so almost a year ago, how's that possible? Almost a year ago, I did my first GI map. I did episodes about it, but in short, it's a stool sample. So you poop and you put some of your poop in a little thing and you shake it up and you ship it out. And it looks at the bacteria in your gut, the enzymes in your gut, the inflammation markers in your gut, and so much more. Bacteria, parasites, all this stuff. And the reason that matters so much is it goes back to the individuality of your approach to nutrition. And you know how I said, not only is it different person to person, it's different for that person over time. And that is because what is happening in our gut tells us what our body can and can't handle at that time, or what is optimal or suboptimal for our gut at that time, for our body at that time, based on what enzymes are we deficient in? What bacteria are we deficient in? What bacteria are really strong and healthy? Are there pathogens? Are there parasites? What enzymes are struggling? Is there inflammation? Is there leaky gut? So I did it in June, and then I did it again. And I wanted to show you some of the data, the objective data, because again, I don't want you to feel like, I don't know what to do. There is subjective tools, energy, focus, mood, sleep, weight, all of those kinds of things that we were just discussing, but there's also objective data. You do not have to get a GI map, but if you are feeling confused and like nothing is working, it's absolutely worth considering. Now, I think it's about $500, which is a lot of money, but if it makes you healthier, it is not a lot of money, right? Because sickness is going to cost you way more than $500. I put the link to the GI map in the description too, if you've got questions about that. But what I want to do is I want to show you this. Okay. So steatocrit is the first thing that we're looking at here. And you see how it's like way over in the green? That indicates that my body is really, really good at metabolizing fat. Now, what I didn't pull up, and I've got a couple other values I want to show you, but it looks at a bunch of different bacteria, a couple dozen bacteria. Some of the specific bacteria in our gut are known to be responsible for carbohydrate metabolism, meaning if we don't have sufficient amounts of that bacteria, we will struggle to digest carbohydrates, or they won't digest fully. And so we'll have more fermentation in our belly, which isn't good for the GI tract. And so my steatocrit is super, super healthy, meaning fat metabolism I'm really, really good at. But my bacteria tells me carbohydrate metabolism, not so much. So what that tells me is that for right now, even though I strength train regularly, even though I'm very active and I get about 12,000 steps a day because I walk on my treadmill for a few hours while I'm working most days of the week, I right now need to be higher fat, lower carb, not low carb, not no carb, but the way that my friend Dr. Beth Westy described it to me was like, if you're shooting for 150 grams of protein, Elizabeth, then keep your carbs at 100 or lower. Now, I don't count macros, but knowing that, is just a good way for me to ballpark it. And so that is a great way to know that, hey, you know what? For you, carbs might be amazing. And some carbs are okay for me, but a lot of carbs, not even a lot of carbs, a moderate amount of carbs is not good for me right now. Now, as my gut heals more, that could be in a very different position in a year. Okay, here's the other thing. On the top line, you're going to see my secretory IgA last June and my secretory IgA now. You can see that last June, it was in the red. Okay. And now it's in the green. So what is this IgA? This is an indicator of your body reacting to foods that you are eating, like having an immune response, not like 5-alarm fire, I'm allergic to something the way that my twins are allergic to eggs, but something being an irritant. I think a lot of people, when they think about food sensitivity, they think like allergy, and it's not that. It's a snapshot in time that indicates, based on the health and integrity of your gut right now, you can handle these things, but not these things. And so what was incredibly encouraging to me was going from the red through the yellow into the green, into almost the middle of the green, meaning my body is not reacting to the stuff I'm eating right now, which tells me, hey, kid, keep doing what you're doing. This really matters. Okay. This is another snapshot of last June on the top compared to now on the bottom. Calprotectin is an indicator of inflammation. Now, it's inflammation in the gut. And somebody asked me, like, hey, if you're going to do this autoimmune protocol, do you have to have all of this lab testing done to see what's happening with inflammation? And I said, no, you definitely don't, because there's so many different markers of inflammation. This is just looking at inflammation primarily in the gut. And so I was already in the green, which is great, but now I'm like way further down, which is amazing. That tells me that what I'm doing is working, and it's a vote for keep doing what you're doing. Now, this one was only in my test recently. It wasn't tested last June, and that is zonulin. Don't worry, we're going to get out of this geeky stuff in just one second. Zonulin is an indicator of leaky gut. So I'm right on the borderline of green and yellow. This was the number one thing that made me decide to do another 30 days on the autoimmune protocol to help my gut heal more before I try to reintroduce dairy. Okay. All right. So any questions about that? Do not hesitate to let me know. But that was the big takeaway for me, the combination of subjective and objective. And I don't want you to think you need the objective data points, but I also think that if you're somebody who's frustrated and you can't seem to figure it out, having those objective data points is really, really powerful. Okay, a few more minutes. One thing that I get a lot of questions about is people sharing their struggles around when they're traveling. I feel like I do really well, but then if it's like a weekend away or it's a vacation, I feel like I've undone all my progress. And also, it's really hard for me to get back on track. I don't want that for you. And especially because I've decided to do another 30 days of this protocol, how am I translating that into my upcoming vacation? Tropical vacation without my children. Am I going to stick to this protocol while I am there? And the answer is pretty much yeah. And here's why. I focus on how I want to feel long-term in many ways versus what I want to enjoy short-term in one way. And I used to be the total opposite. I used to say to myself, like, well, I don't care if I feel crappy tomorrow. I've had a bad day. I want the ice cream now. I didn't even allow myself to entertain how bad I was going to feel the next day. And this is a shift that takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of time. And I'm almost 12 years into practicing these shifts. But one of the big things that I think about on vacation is this mantra. Ready? I want to share this with you. I don't know that we've talked about this much on the podcast. My mantra is never go all the way out. I used to be somebody who went all the way out. If I was going to have ice cream, I was also going to have chips and pizza and God knows what else, right? I was all the way out. If I was going to hit snooze and skip my workout, I was all the way out. that meant I could just kind of be lazy and take my time and not follow through and eat whatever I wanted. I was either like all the way in or all the way out. And my mantra now is never go all the way out. Never go all the way out. So what that means is if I'm going to have ice cream, I really want to be intentional about prioritizing protein because it's a mental anchor for me to never go all the way out, right? If I'm going to skip a workout, that's cool, but I'm really going to make sure that my nutrition is on point. Or if I'm going to have a spicy margarita because I love a good tequila and I do not like cheap tequila, I like an expensive, nice, bougie tequila, I'm going to really make sure that I've gotten plenty of time outside, fresh air, sleep, all of those things. Nancy says something you said on a podcast stuck with me, mind the gap. Yeah, to me, the gap is the difference between where we are and where we want to be. And I use that for a ton of things, but especially when it comes to a dinner out or a weekend away or a trip or a holiday. Never go all the way out. Never go all the way out. What are some anchor behaviors? And so that's one of the questions that I'm bringing with me into my little time away, which is going to be so interesting because we're not taking our children, which is a big deal for us. And so my sister is going to be here, not only with our 3 toddlers, but also with our 25 baby chickens, 5 goats, and a dog. And my sister has no kids and no pets. What could go wrong? What could go wrong, right? But back to my own thought process here. What are the anchors that I can stick to no matter where I am? So being in a tropical place, I can be up early and get direct sunlight. I'm going to be talking a ton about that in the next couple weeks because I think there are some big things that people are missing about its impact on metabolism, sunlight specifically. Not to mention the obvious stuff that most people think about in terms of mood, but the anchors are going to be sunlight, walking a ton, protein first, and minimal starch and sugar, right? There's going to be a ton of fruit, I'm sure, in a tropical location, minimal starch and sugar. So think about that. What are some of the anchors that you can bring with you no matter where you are, whether it's a holiday or it's a vacation or it's a weekend away or it's just a dinner out or it's when somebody brings donuts into the break room? What are your anchor behaviors and what does it look like to you to never go all the way out? Never go all the way out. I think that sometimes there are these perspectives that are inherently powerful, but they don't feel powerful in our own lives because we hear them and then we move on to the next thing. And the step that we miss is turning it into a practice. And I don't think we need to do that with 7 or 8 different ideas, but definitely pick one that you can really sink your teeth into. For me, never go all the way out is a huge one. For me, anchor behaviors is a huge one. And you have to think about that for yourself too. And I'd love to help you do that. We talk about that kind of stuff a lot on the podcast. I do that a lot with my clients, but I'm going to get inside and get my kids to bed. I told my husband I would be in to help with bedtime, so I want to honor that. I'm so pumped that we got this inaugural episode up and running. I've got to figure out the overlay thing. I will absolutely do that. And yes, Nancy, my sister, is brave. It might be the last time that she volunteers to watch our children, but at least we'll get away for a little bit. So thank you guys for joining me here. Even if you watch this replay after and you have questions, drop them in the comments. I will get back to you, or you can email me and we can chat that way. You can find me on Instagram at Elizabeth Benton, but thank you for hanging out. Thank you all for being here. If you think of questions later, let me know and I'll talk to you guys soon.